AFMC is really known.
And also make sure
Hello and welcome into this week's edition of AFMC TV. We're glad you're joining us. Today we are talking about dry skin, but not just your typical dry skin and needing to add extra moisturizer, but what about flare-ups on your skin because it is so dry, flare-ups such as psoriasis and eczema. Joining us today is Becca Denniston from Dermatology Group of Arkansas, our resident dermatologist that helps keep our skin in check this time of year.
Yes.
So it is drier.
Yes.
And once it becomes drier, are we more at an increase of having skin irritations flare up, whether it is eczema, psoriasis, or something else?
Sure. Oh, definitely. I mean, you have to think when the air gets cooler, the skin, you have drier air, cooler air, everything just dries out. And it can be anywhere on your body. It's not just one given area. I do think there's certain areas you see it more frequently, like your hands, for instance, your face. But all those things, psoriasis, eczema, and just dry skin in general, can be worse in the winter and the cooler months, for sure.
Let's take a step back and just maybe define or talk about what is psoriasis,
Yes.
What is eczema. We're talking about two different things here.
Right, exactly. So they are two different things. Psoriasis is more of an immune-mediated inflammatory disorder of the skin, and it's a chronic inflammatory condition. The easiest way to explain it is that your body is producing skin cells at an abnormally fast rate. Oh. And so when it does that, the skin cells build up and they create these plaques. And they're not just patches of dry skin. They're really thick, scaly, sometimes silvery plaques. Mm-hmm. They're really common on the elbows, the knees. You can get it in the scalp, the groin. But it's not just your typical dry skin. Okay. It's much more involved than that. And then on the other hand, eczema is also an inflammatory disorder of the skin that can also be chronic in nature, but it's more of just dry, irritated skin. So red, itchy. You don't get as much of those thick plaques like you would with psoriasis. Mm-hmm. They are kind of treated similarly in mild cases, but psoriasis oftentimes, if it's doesn't respond well to topical medicines or it's covering a large part of your body, you have to do more aggressive medicines. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely things that you can do over the counter for eczema and psoriasis that can help quite a bit. Yeah. So some of the things, basic things for especially eczema, is kind of repairing your skin barrier. So you can kind of think of it, the skin barrier's broken down, it's losing water, it's not keeping the hydration in. So what do you do to fix that?
Lather up, right?
Yes, lather up. And the big thing is that cream-based products are going to be better than lotion. Sure. Lotion's more water-based. Creams and then emollients like Vaseline, Aquaphor, thicker things to lock in moisture. Okay. And then sometimes that doesn't work and you have to do more aggressive, topical steroid medicines and things like that you get through your dermatologist, and some primary care doctors would prescribe that as well.
Is this the worst time of year, or are we going into, or?
So it varies for certain people. Some people are worse in the summer months when they're hot and they're sweaty. They'll have eczema flares. Okay. And then other people, it's the cooler months. Okay. I do think the cooler months tend to be worse, but really you can have it any time of year, pretty much.
Are there precautions that we can take to keep our skin from becoming too irritated?
Yes.
And not flare?
Yes. So one of the things, besides doing creams and emollients and things like that, humidifiers are really good during the winter to get that moisture back in. But then something that a lot of people don't think about is there are certain things that irritate the skin and kind of set off eczema that we might be using every day. Oh. So for instance, chemicals and fragrance and preservatives found in laundry detergent that you wash your clothes in is a big one. Mm-hmm. Fragrance, lotion, all of that kind of stuff can set off eczema. So kind of backing off of those, doing more non-scented, preservative-free, fragrance-free, that's what you want to look for on the products you're using. And then the other big thing would be soaps. What are you bathing with? You really want to stay away from true soaps. And that sounds odd, but true soaps are going to strip all the oil off your skin.
Okay.
So you want to stick to more moisturizing things, like Dove is a really good brand. You want to stay away from the harsher soaps like Dial, Ivory, Irish Spring. Those are really going to dry you out.
Okay.
So
if you feel a flare-up starting to come on, is there something that you can do almost immediate, such as start lathering with the Aquaphor to try to minimize the flare?
Yes, definitely. I think we kind of call it a soak and seal technique, and it works pretty well. But basically you bathe like you normally would, and you kind of pat dry and leave that a little bit of water on your skin.
Yep.
And then you first put on your thicker moisturizer cream. That's kind of the first layer that goes on. And then you put your emollient on top. So Vaseline or Aquaphor. And it sounds like a lot, but the emollient layer kind of locks everything in. And most people will sleep in, cotton pajamas or something to cover up the area. If it's your hands, you can do cotton gloves.
Or socks. Even.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both those work really well. And so that's an easy way to just kind of, get on top of it quickly and get it under control.
If you've never had an experience with psoriasis or with eczema, and it doesn't matter your age, teenager, young adult, older adult, retiree, if you've never had, are you good, or could you develop it at some point in your life?
Yes.
Before you die?
It's a great question. You can develop it at any point in your life. And that's what's hard about it.
That is tough.
A lot of people think, eczema, we see a lot in kids, obviously.
Sure.
But you can develop it later on in life. If you develop something out of nowhere, let's say on your hands, and they're really, really bad and irritated, sometimes we'll often wonder if you have more of a contact allergy than a true eczema, if it's later in life.
Okay.
There's ways to kind of differentiate that, but contact allergies can come up at any point in your life where, you use the same lotion or soap for 20 years and all of a sudden you're allergic to it. Yeah, and so that can mimic eczema later on in life, and the two, you can have both together. But then psoriasis, you can develop it at any point in time. It's an immune-related, inflammatory condition, and so there's certain things that can trigger it. Genetics definitely can play a role, but then also just immune-mediated diseases and dips in your immune system and things can all of a sudden cause that to come up.
Is there anything preventative that we can do, or is it just your normal, hey, in these drier months, you know what to do? Thicker moisturizers, humidify.
Yeah, I think for eczema, yes, all of those things can definitely be preventative. If you start, before it gets super dry, if you're prone to eczema and you start with the moisturizers and the emollients, it's definitely going to help. Psoriasis is a little bit different. There's not a true way to really prevent that, but I do think it can help by using moisturizers and things like that. But a lot of times with psoriasis, it's much more severe than eczema, and so a lot of times you'll have to do prescription medicine to help with that.
And one final question, eczema, psoriasis, is it more likely a male problem or more likely a female problem, or are we about evenly split?
It's about even for the most part. I think, as definitely kids with eczema, it's pretty well even. I don't think there's a huge difference. I think as you get older, contact allergies, even with eczema, it can be about the same. And so there's not a way to say, okay, women age 50 and older are going to get eczema more than a male. Yeah. So it's pretty well even split. I'd say psoriasis is kind of the same way. I do feel like I see quite a bit of psoriasis in men and women on a daily basis. So prevalence kind of goes both ways.
Okay.
So,
all right, Becca, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Joining us now is Helen Dubose from Natural State Health Center. And Helen, I'm so excited to have you in because today we're talking about thermal imaging. And I know we talked a little bit beforehand when I lived in another region of the country. Thermal imaging was a big deal, and a lot of people were utilizing that service, that option, and then moved to Arkansas, and we don't know what you're talking about, and then I found you. So maybe let's start with just defining what is thermal imaging, because just the words alone might make someone go, that sounds a little scary. So what is it?
So thermal is basically heat.
Yep.
Imaging is as if you were taking a picture.
Yep.
So I use a very sensitive infrared camera, a FLIR.
Okay.
They're often used in the military.
Yep.
And so the camera is actually looking for hot patterns or cold patterns. That tells a picture as well.
Mm-hmm.
So inflammation is heat.
Yep.
Inflammation is stage 2 of disease versus full-blown cancer being stage 6.
Gotcha.
So you're looking at a very early detection of perhaps hidden disease, because oftentimes we don't know we have disease until we have symptoms, which then is full blown. So inflammation, early detection of any possible disease processes that could be going on.
I had someone tell me once that they could not see me until about 4 weeks after a marathon, because it wouldn't have been an accurate reading because of all the inflammation in my body after having just
Yes.
exercised to the max.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about how it works. I mean, I know you said it detects inflammation. Take me through, if I were a patient or if I were coming in, take me through. What does that look like?
All right. Well, you're going to answer a questionnaire. Very thorough. I input all your information. My camera is about this big versus perhaps some in the military, which are quite a bit bigger.
Right.
Segueing just a little bit, people might understand more about what I'm talking about if they remember the Boston Marathon bomber was actually detected using infrared imaging. He was in a boat with a tarp over him. Had he had a board over him, the camera couldn't have picked it up. But his heat signature was in this boat. Okay, so back to where we were. You'll get a questionnaire. You answer the questions. You come in. I input everything. You're behind a curtain. Of course, you have to take all your clothes off, most of them, because the camera cannot pick up on the inflammation if you have anything blocking that.
Okay.
And oftentimes, people will touch themselves. And I have to say, don't touch yourselves because it puts a heat signature on you. Okay. And we have to wait and let it cool off. So anyway, you're behind a curtain. I'm in front of a computer. My camera is facing you. And I take images, probably about 8 of each region of interest. Mm-hmm. So then, and it takes quite a bit of, time because there's lots of questions. But then I send the images off to a team of doctors, MDs, called Physicians Insight. Mm-hmm. And one of those doctors then reads the images and sends me a report.
So I know you mentioned that you're looking for hot spots or heat spots, but you're also detecting cold.
Yes.
What does the cold signify? That everything's okay? Or?
Well, in thermal imaging, the doctor is looking for imbalances. Okay. So just take the breasts, for instance. If you have one breast that has several really hot patterns in it, and then the other breast is cold, that tells the doctor that perhaps the inflamed breast is pulling good blood from the opposing breast to feed the disease.
Okay.
So that says a lot.
Okay.
If they're balanced and cool, then that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But their patterns, splotchiness indicates hormonal imbalance. There's a pattern for immune strength or weakness on your back. And again, that's hot and cold. It's often, cold around the T3 mm-hmm. and then hot around it. So.
And are you basically doing from head to toe? I mean, are you detecting like any imbalances in your mouth? And you've already mentioned your spine and your chest.
Yes.
Legs and toes, gut.
Yes, I do a health study, which is images of your head and neck. Mm-hmm. Of course, your chest and breast, your back, and all of your abdomen. Mm-hmm. The skin gets great referrals. And by that, skin is organ. So we have the liver, pancreas, spleen, colon, ovaries, thyroid, carotid arteries. Everything communicates with the skin. So we're getting referrals for all of those organs. Kidneys are too deep, but yeah.
So what would be your best recommendation for someone who might want to try this? I knew I'd exercised way too much and was too inflamed and might not get an accurate reading. But the average person, if can you have caffeine that morning before you come in, or could that be So what are some of the things?
There's some instructions. They're really easy. It's no caffeine. You don't want to be in your car with your seat heater, heat seater on. You don't want cold air blowing on you.
Yeah.
Things like that. Can't wear deodorant.
Okay.
We want to get a good reading of the lymph system.
Yeah.
So one of the important things when you come in and I'm inputting your information, you have to sit like this to cool off, because we don't want heat from being hot. We want heat from your lymph system. And back to the health. So the health study is basically everything but arms and legs.
Okay.
And I often recommend that the first time, because there's a really strong correlation between dental health and breast health.
Interesting.
So I will have, for example, a woman might come in. I had one woman and she was actually swollen on this side of her mouth. And you can have what they call a cult infection under your crowns. So it's infection you don't know about.
Sure.
And so she did not know what was going on, but obviously this side of her mouth was so inflamed. And guess what? That breast was also inflamed. So I like to do the health study just to see if there's anything that could be causing breast ill health,
Or just any kind of...
Well, yeah, and thyroid disease is a lot. That's super helpful. Thermal imaging, super helpful. Picks up where perhaps a blood test doesn't. In my opinion, the blood test for thyroid disease is not that accurate. So then you have added, if you will, ammunition to take to your doctor. See, this says my thyroid's inflamed, or my thyroid's cold, or, so.
And is this something that a person would need a prescription for, or a referral for, if they want to do thermal imaging?
No.
Okay.
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
You can come in. A lot of my clients like for their OB-GYNs to be involved in the process.
Of course.
Some are amiable to this, some are not. We live in a very medically, I don't want to say controlled, but it's a very huge medical community.
Sure.
So a lot of doctors aren't aware of thermal imaging. So they get it and they're like, what is this?
Right. Right.
Some are very aware of it and actually prefer it.
Right.
Um,
And that's what I thought was interesting, moving from the East Coast, where it is accepted, and that is just another tool in the toolbox, to then coming here and going, okay, well, it always takes, they say both coasts, and then takes a while to get to the middle. And so, yeah.
Well, that's another thing to add to. Thermal imaging is not diagnostic.
Right.
So you will never get a report back from the doctor saying you have
XYZ.
XYZ. Yes, you'll never, but the doctor will strongly suggest, based on what he or she sees, further clinical correlation.
Yep.
She might go so far as to suggest, hormonal imbalance, thyroid disease, things like that as well. Or she might suggest your liver is congested, consider a liver cleanse, or things like that.
Well, Helen, thank you so much. This has been very informative, and it's nice to see that this is another option that we have.
It is cash only too, I have to say.
Okay.
Insurance
so not
is-
something to insure.
No, insurance is not, doesn't like us yet.
Okay. It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming, it is.
Well, Helen, thank you for
You're
joining
welcome.
us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you back here next week for more AFMC TV.